Go ahead, Joel.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. This is Joel Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of the Washington State Association of Head Start and ECAP. And we are a statewide C3 organization that represents Head Start and ECAP providers, staff, and parents, and of course advocates for some of the most at-risk children in our state. We have been doing a series of candidate forums. Each is about 30 minutes in length. Typically what we've been doing is we have a set of questions, and then if we have time at the end, we give attendees an opportunity to ask some questions too. Tonight we are joined by Jamila Taylor, who's running for the legislative district out in Federal Way, and very excited to have her join us. And would you like to, Jamila, would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us why you're interested in coming to a forum today on supporting young children and families?
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Yes, my name is Jamila Taylor. I'm a candidate for state representative in the 30th District, which is South King County and a little bit of North Pierce County. About me, I'm an attorney, a small business owner, and a longtime community advocate. I've dedicated my career and years of community involvement to serving diverse populations. As the former statewide advocacy counsel for Northwest Justice Project, I've managed a network of legal aid attorneys assisting domestic violence survivors and other crime victims, including their children. I've worked locally and regionally on youth violence prevention and intervention programs and other crime and violence reduction efforts. So a lot of my efforts really centered around the after-school programming and working with families and school districts and other support systems to help steer kids into different directions and sometimes healthier options than what they were facing. And most of those students were middle school and high school and young adults. My leadership experience spans more than 20 years and ranges from policy making all the way to program evaluation. So I know how the work gets done for the benefit of community. And as we rebuild our post-COVID-19 economy, because we will get there, we need progressive champions who know what it's like to manage public funds during difficult times, and those who understand the experience of residents facing difficult decisions in their daily lives. Like many in the 30th District and beyond, I felt and I feel the pain of wondering how my business and my family will get through COVID-19. And in fact, I made a pivot this summer when I accepted a full-time position working for the Public Defender Association as a staff attorney for the Legal Services and the Racial Disparity Project, which means I get to work with more folks from the community who need legal assistance, who can't afford my services. And so I'm living into my passions. About me personally, I'm a daughter and a sister, and I share a household with my mother and my twin brother who both have chronic illnesses. So like many in the United States, I'm part of that squeeze generation. So I have started to help my family members before I was able to and have been able to start my own family. And I'm glad to be able to do that and to be in a position to do so. And part of that means that I have to navigate the medical health care system. It's a constant in our family. And so understanding the challenges that go along with that. When I first moved to King County area, I experienced a struggle to find and keep affordable housing. I had moved 7 times in 6 years before finally landing here in Federal Way, which was just the right decision for our family. I'm running because we need leaders who are committed to addressing our shared concerns about the economic recovery, homelessness, affordable housing, public safety, criminal justice reform, public transportation, healthcare, education, and then equity that lays bare through all of that. We've seen what happened with COVID-19 that exposed a serious safety net gap, inequity in so many systems, from healthcare access, education, as you all are very well aware, to small business recovery, and even on our own district. We also need leaders who are willing to give residents whose future are interrupted by the pandemic hope and opportunity. It cannot all be gloom and doom. We have resources to make a pivot. It's not about creating the new normal, it's about creating new possibilities. And I'm proud of the experience and the perspective that reflects my deep commitment to public service and positive change that works for the whole community. So thank you so much for having me today and share some of my ideas and hopefully learn some from all the efforts that you're putting in for children and their families.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Yuval, who will be emceeing our questions. So,
Thank you.
Yuval, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Our first warm-up question for you today is this. Since our forum is focused on young children and families, what was your favorite children's book growing up and why?
Ooh. Favorite children's book. I would have to say that I wasn't a child that loved reading. And so this is a hard question for me. I definitely love learning. And so you're gonna have to keep this secret from my dad. Just kidding, just kidding. My dad's is a professor of history. And so he really instilled in us learning from as many sources as we could. And so I distinctly remember reading the encyclopedia and looking up things. So doing research to find something to have a purpose, that's what I remember doing as a 6 or 7 year old. And it was back in the day when you actually had the stacks of encyclopedia. So I know I've got to be the weirdest person ever to say like the encyclopedia. No, I don't.
I remember having that Encyclopedia Britannica or whatever, that giant, I remember my mom getting that. And she really thought I was going to like read all of I just remember this giant bookcase of,
right?
I don't know how closely I followed it, but.
I mean, my favorite report was writing about the sea otters. Okay. So like being able to show a little knowledge. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Comes in handy.
That's awesome.
Thank you for that. So throughout the questions we have for you today, we have a team of parents who will help ask them. And so I believe April will ask the next question.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Jessica is going to ask the next question. She's a constituent in your district, so.
Hello.
Hi, Jessica. I think I'd seen your name before. I wasn't sure if I had met you before.
Well, I follow you and Jesse Johnson and Claire, and I post and say things sometimes, so you may have seen me along the lines there.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question is, what is your definition of early learning?
Ooh, I would say my definition of early learning includes any option where families can bring the village in to support the development of a child. So that could be as young as 6 months old, and you've got a really good daycare provider, to formal educational opportunities that are pre-kindergarten. So I haven't had a lot of exposure to the world of early learning and parenting. And so I would say I'm going with just my very basic definitions of anything that really brings the village to support a child.
Thank you.
I think I'm up next. Research shows that investments in comprehensive early childhood education pay off, particularly for disadvantaged children and families. ECAP is one of those high-quality comprehensive programs that serve some of the most at-risk families. Do you support increased ECAP funding? Why or why not?
Absolutely. In the work that I've done with family law in particular, I know that there are a lot of families who are in poverty, who are facing a lot of difficult challenges, and resources that can help the child be as ready for their formal educational environment when they go to kindergarten, go on to first grade, I think it just is a great equalizer. So how can we ensure that families have more access to these resources, especially when it can reduce the education gap that so many families have experienced.
Thank you. Jessica will be asking our next question.
Child care providers are some of the lowest paid workers, often making less than parking lot attendants and dog walkers, while families are struggling to find affordable care. What will you do to make childcare more affordable for families and increase wages and benefits for the childcare providers?
Definitely, I think we need to look at how we can overhaul the industry from the inside out in partnership with those who are experts on providing the care. I mean, I think it's a long vestige of folks who just don't value childcare in the same way they value, owning a pizza shop. How can we ensure that folks understand that this is a workforce need, that employers need to make more investments in childcare options for families in communities like the Federal Way and South King County area, that it increases options and opportunities for parents to be able to advance themselves when they have great childcare options, and then making sure that we are investing in reducing the cost of giving childcare. So how can state and local governments underwrite locations, like paying the rent, providing free ongoing education for the providers, providing free health care for the providers because they're providing such a critical service in the community. So it's almost like public education as an entity, as a way of expanding services down into childcare. And the thing is that I think a lot of parents are now seeing with the pandemic how life is difficult trying to do all things. Like if you're working from home and providing childcare, it's two different body of work. Like you can't do everything very well at the same time. And so I think there could be some new value systems that are developing around childcare and how we can approach the industry in a whole new way. But absolutely in collaboration with those who understand how the industry works and where the gaps are.
Thank you for that. Only 5%, about 5% of Washington state eligible families receive home visiting from federal, state, and local funding, leaving many of our families unserved. What are your plans to support pregnant moms and families with newborn children? Are you going to work towards expanding policies around paid family leave, early ECAP, and home visiting?
Yes, I mean, I think anything that we can do to help our children be as healthy as possible, those have, I guess, a multiplying effect. And so if we can show that these are things that really support the whole community, these investments, it's necessary for us to have a thriving and safe and healthy community with all the resources that can be provided for families.
Thank you. Our next question is, prior to COVID-19, 1 in 11 children were homeless. Due to the pandemic, we have seen an increase in homeless children and families. What will you do to ensure children have a safe and stable housing?
Well, right now, the single most important thing we can do at the state legislature is ensure that we have rental assistance for residents throughout the entire state. So we need to make sure that that gap is filled. A lot of folks have a misunderstanding that the eviction moratorium means that I don't have to pay rent, or there are a lot of folks who have lost income and cannot afford rent right now with the COVID-19. So we need to do more to provide rental assistance as we transition out, and then look at opportunities to prevent homelessness. So that also means that we have to revision how we're addressing the challenges. We saw how in the pandemic, we were able to mobilize and utilize more hotels for transitional housing and basically use a housing first model where folks said, well, we can't do it. But suddenly in a pandemic, we figured out how to do it. And so we need to find more ways, again, to go to new possibilities, look at new possibilities given the way we were able to swoop in the pandemic to address some of the challenges, especially in the public health crisis that may not go away very quickly.
Thank you.
What would you do to ensure every child has access to medical, mental health, and dental care?
We need to, like right now with the pandemic, we need to, go headlong into supporting all of these options. So we need to make sure that we have medical care continued. I know that when the pandemic first hit, one of the things that got vetoed by Governor Inslee, unfortunately, was expanded mental health services in the schools. So how do we restore that funding? Because, we have to say it's okay to not be okay. A lot of folks are dealing with a lot of stressors, and those have physical health implications. Those have mental health implications. It could lead to other disorders, substance use disorders that are untreated. So I think this is a situation where, as we are emerging out of the pandemic, that we have to headlong into more healthcare options and healthcare resources and make those investments for literally healthy communities.
Early learning is about 1% of the state's budget. In your opinion, is the state of Washington investing sufficiently in early childhood education?
No. Next question. Just kidding.
Thank you.
It's not. I mean, and we see the effects of it. There are, like, some communities where the investments are challenged, or just not enough, or I feel like when I was working in the Youth Violence Prevention Initiative, there were a lot of programs that families were struggling to access. Or there were barriers that were created that make it harder for them to access. And I think there is a way to, tie it all together. And that means that we just have to revision what is healthy and what investments we need to make into our community. Our budgets are getting upside down with things that actually don't benefit community, don't benefit public safety, don't actually put resources back into the community. And when you go as far upstream as possible, meaning to, parenting, pregnant and parenting, early education, like, forgive me for not knowing all the terms, but I'm an ally and I'm willing to learn.
I love it.
But if we're looking up the stream, prevention is the most cost-effective way to address community problems. So preventing homeless by making sure folks have the resources they need, the jobs they have, the proper childcare, so they don't have to have 3 and 4 jobs. And then if one of those jobs goes away because, then they can't pay their childcare, then they don't have the disposable income to do X, Y, and Z. Like, it all ties in together. And we have to have these conversations where you see how the whack-a-mole, like, you start taking away from one thing, and then you would think that it solves our problems. And we saw with the 2008 recession and that slash and burn of everything, how it is now affecting how we are responding to the challenges that we're facing right now.
That's one of the questions that we're thinking too, and just because you're getting to it, is how would you approach balancing the budget? Would you look at new revenue? Would you look at cuts? What's your balance? What are your core values around this?
First and foremost, I want to make sure that the folks who are most marginalized are protected first. And then thinking about how the budget can be built in such a way where we're flipping it on its head. Like, right now we have the most regressive tax generation system in the United States. And so obviously we need to look at long-term solutions that are not always heavily reliant on sales tax revenue. So that means that we got to, have those who can pay their fair share do so. So right now, if people don't have a disposable income because they can barely make rent, they can barely pay for childcare, or they can't even go back to work because there is no available childcare, we have a cycle that does not allow us to recover very well. And so we have to look at how do we support from the people first, not necessarily from the heads of business on tax cuts and other things that ultimately make us more vulnerable as we are trying to emerge out of the COVID economic recovery. And so in sum, it's really about a mix of if we have to make a cut, we want to protect those who are the most vulnerable first. Then we have to look at tapping into the rainy day funds, because that's what a rainy day fund is for. And luckily, we've recently learned that the shortfalls is not as large as they anticipated. And then we need to look at long-term solutions so that we can be more economically resilient when economic crises happen in the future.
Oh, thank you.
Our next question is, nearly 1 in 5 children do not get enough to eat in the U.S. What is your plan to ensure all children and youth get the nutrition they require?
I mean, it's very similar to making sure the most vulnerable have access to the foods and the nutrition, the mental health care, the medical care. It's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If a kid is unable to get the proper nutrition, eat before coming to school, that might be the only food they're getting for the day or even longer. I mean, I have seen children who will take on a stipend, and some people think, oh, they're taking on a stipend, why pay kids? And they went to go pay their family's light bill. This is a 13-year-old, so there's a presumption that all of these kids are doing, wasting their money or what have you. And that's my perspective working in the after school programs and things like that. But we absolutely need to make sure that food is, available, healthy food options. I mean, because we've seen how the federal industry, the federal government will approve Cheetos and things like that, but they won't approve basic healthy options or revamp how we are, what we're feeding in the lunchroom and things like that. And they'll blame the children and say, oh, the kids won't eat X, Y, and Z, when really as a culture, we're not valuing the healthy foods, where we have food deserts in many communities where all they can go and get are fast food options, or that's what the family can get. And because the household, the challenges with maybe living in substandard housing, and they can't store all the food that they need to store. So there's all these other things that we're not thinking about when we're doing the policy making. And my job is to ask the hard questions, be willing to be vulnerable, and be like, okay, I'm an idiot. If we are investing in this type of resource for families, my impression is that this type of family may not want this type of food. Is that what you're seeing on the ground? Or should we have more culturally relevant options, so folks who cannot eat certain types of foods have those options when we're trying to bring them into the schools and beyond? I mean, because we also saw with the pandemic, when the schoolhouse is closed, the children don't have access to food. And so making sure that the policy is flexible enough to address when the building is open. I think people have really or I would say underestimated how essential the schoolhouse, the physical building, is to the lives of so many people in our community, whether you have children or not. Because I have no children, but I tell you, when I saw the bus driver coming around the corner to test the system and get started with getting ready to bring the kids back, I was so excited, because then I knew families would find some level of solace, because the kids can get back to a level of normalcy, by going back to the school. It could be because they're getting their food. It could be because they're getting their mental health. It could be because they're getting access to supportive services that they can't get otherwise. Like, there are a lot of children and families who are in, have learning disabilities. And so their stability has been with the supportive care that they've had. My twin brother has learning disabilities. And so I can't imagine how his success would have been impacted if he wasn't able, if he and I weren't able to go to school for a year or more. And whether that would have had a negative impact on his progress, when so many people in my family were facing administrators who said, oh, he'll never graduate. My brother graduated. He got, he was able to get a driver's license. He even was able to go to school, to community college. And so the resources that we needed in the school district are so essential, even before we both went to preschool and kindergarten. I mean, the work that you're doing is essential for so many families.
Thank you. Our next question is, how will you ensure that all children and youth have access to high quality, safe, and supervised before and after school programs, as well as summer programs?
I mean, this is what I love to talk about the most because of the work I did in youth development. And I believe that there are resources out there. I would want to continue to partner with organizations that are doing great work in this space, but also recognize that there are grassroots organizations who are really based in community that have a tie to these kids in a way that is so resilience making. It's like when you get to see mentors from down the street come and help you with certain things. So we absolutely need to have more of these resources come to bear. That means, grassroots organizations, culturally responsive organizations, in large institutions that can help fill the gap in ways as we're expanding options for childcare and after school care and before school care. And then again, partnerships with businesses to make sure that there's an investment by the workforce in these resources so the families can have access to the things that they need and reduce the pain point of how do I afford everything? Food on the table, school clothes, getting the kid to and from school, getting the children to and from after school programs, meeting the needs beyond just what's happening in the day, and making sure they have proper food. So it all kind of ties together from my perspective, and I'm really looking forward to working with you all and others who are really invested on how those systems interplay with each other.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking at the time, and so I definitely would love to take this opportunity now to open up the floor for Q&A or follow-up questions from the audience.
I would like to ask for you, can you please repronounce your name for me? I kind of missed in the beginning. I want to make sure I pronounce it correctly.
Sure. It's Jamila.
Jamila. Okay, Jamila, thank you. I honestly have been excited about most of the things you've had to say, and I've also seen that you have showed an interest in missing, murdered, Indigenous women, which is something that I haven't seen a whole lot of in the past before. And so I was mainly here just to follow up and see more about you, because I'm probably going to vote for you. I'm about 99% there. I've appreciated everything I've seen and everything you've had to say. And I have just, I have young children. I have 3 of them. And I do this program. I help get out of a domestic violence situation. And there wasn't a lot of support, and there hasn't been a lot, outside of the program. There's not a lot of
Jessica, what program are you talking about? Just so
I am referring to PSESD, so Puget Sound ESD. I was started as, I guess my daughter went to Truman, which is one of the preschools for Head Start here in Federal Way. And then I got associated with them and the Parent Policy Council. and then
Mhm.
leadership team. And then I've continued to grow my interest in all of these programs. And prior to these, I would never have even considered talking to a politician. And now
Mm.
I'm very involved trying to get other people to vote. And so it's programs like these that have made a huge difference in my life and supported me. And now I'm even happy to say I'm actually working for the Federal Way School District doing accounting. So I just feel things like this have been very supportive. I appreciate your support in these programs. I look forward to the future partnerships that you could develop with them,
Mhm.
us, me, everybody. It
Right.
sounds like you have very large interest in that, and I am excited to
Yeah.
see you in action. I hope you
I
win.
mean, I thank you so much. I mean, I believe that, you know, supporting parents and helping parents build more resiliency through the challenges, I mean, because things are going to happen to us. Sometimes we just can't control what the world does to us. And helping the parents to have access to the resources they need really does support the children, because a lot of times what happened with my kids is like, I can put them in a program, then I send them home, and they are still challenged by toxic environments. They're still challenged by lack of parents being able to be involved. And so if we're able to really address some of these challenges in a way where parents have access to family wage jobs, so they can have just one job, just one job. I mean, being a parent itself is a job, but beyond that, but one job allows for parents to be more involved in things. And I see the struggle that so many people have. Like, they would want to do all the things if they had the physical capacity to do so. And so how do we ensure that we transition into the new possibility where parents are really allowed, because they have the freedom with the proper income, the freedom with the proper support resources that cost less, that the spread is made a little bit larger, so that folks have access to those resources, will really support our communities to be more thriving. Clearly, I'm having a good time. I could talk about this all night long, from, again, a non-parent perspective. And I think that's an advantage I have, is because I don't want to undermine my listening to what varying views are out there from parents and teachers, educators, and all those in the industry. I want to come at it from a perspective of like, let me learn. Well, what does that really mean? Maybe one day I'll be in a position where I get to be a parent, but right now I'm hoping to be a great listener and a great ally and a support down in Monrovia. And certainly with Claire Wilson and Jesse Johnson there, I have a lot of great, mentorship in the industry that I'd love to build on.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Joel, did you have your finishing statement?
I don't have any amazing finishing statement. I was just going to ask Jamila, what do you have any closing thoughts, comments, anything else you'd like to just leave us with?
I would say that, I'm a continual learner. Like, even though I said at the beginning of the meeting that I wasn't a strong reader. I didn't really like reading that much when I was younger. I like research. I like learning about new things. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to change the conversation with other electeds. We are in a watershed moment with what's happening with the racial climate right now, with the response to the public health crises. This is a watershed moment to move us in new directions for new possibilities. And the system's already broken, so we can do only the things that will fix it, and we will fix it together, and we will work on it together. And I'm looking forward to having more conversations and action planning with you all.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. It's great having you tonight.
Thank you so